Hi, my name is Dutch Thompson with MP3, Move Past Pain to Performance. And I and my company perform neuroplasticity work. So when other professions trying to help athletes or people get past pain might focus on the joint or the problem area that's not working, I and my colleagues look more at the neuromechanical issues that might be occurring or not occurring between the brain and that place. So I'm always looking for how to make the brain work better. So I'm especially interested in what's happening, what things might be happening in our lives individually and globally that are impacting our brains. So certainly right now with COVID-19, it's a very peculiar time and a time that we are under a unique pressure that may be having a more negative impact on us than we're aware of. So I thought it was really important to get Cyle Eldred with us today. Cyle is the author of Winning for Habit Change. He has a video series by the same title and a book that incorporates all of the ideas from his video series, Winning at Habit Change. So what we're going to talk about today is this idea of maybe how can we create habit change, make it accessible in our life, and maybe get a couple of hints on how to get through this season a little bit better with the pressures that we're facing, maybe getting back to work when we do get back to work a little bit stronger, a little bit more adept at what we want to do, and maybe launch faster and more successfully into whatever objectives that we have in front of us. So at any rate, I've got Cyle with me now. I'm going to bring him into the room and we'll start to talk. So Cyle, welcome. So glad that you're on Game Changers today for episode 5. Welcome.
Hey Dutch, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Good to have you here. So Cyle, if you could, I'm starting with all of my guests just by asking initially, how are you yourself coping with this environment? How are things going?
Challenging to some degree, but kind of not a whole lot different to some degree also. I work from home. I have my own studio in my house, and so I'm home a lot anyway. Actually, I've worked from home through most of my careers for probably the last 3 decades, if I want to admit how old I am. So working from home is really nothing new for me. I've been doing that for a long time. But, of course, there are the worries and concerns, and it's different going to the grocery store with a mask on and, washing your hands and don't touch your face and all that kind of stuff. But it's good. All in all, it's good. I live here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've got my own swimming pool, so my pool isn't shut down. I can go get in it when I want to. And I've got a nice big backyard, so I can move around in that. So it's all good.
Sounds good. All right. So tell us a little bit about how you got into habit change. Why is this important to you?
Okay. It started with plantar fasciitis, believe it or not.
Okay.
So back in, I think it was '08, I got plantar fasciitis. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's pain in your feet, but it's not just any pain in your feet. It can be excruciating pain in your feet. In fact, sometimes it can feel like you're actually stepping on needles. So anyone who's had this before knows this experience. And I remember several times crawling to the bathroom in the morning because I couldn't walk.
Wow.
And I remember one time I was sure I stepped on a needle, and I actually sat down and pulled my sock off and started picking at my heel trying to find that needle, and there wasn't one. It was just the pain from the plantar fasciitis. So I went to the doctor, and he's like, yeah, there's really no cure for this. I could give you $500 orthotics, but they're not really going to do much for you. My best advice is just stay off your feet. And I was like, well, I don't like that answer because I like to do all kinds of things, right? Hike, ride my bike, run, do all this stuff. And I was like, stay off my feet. That's not going to be an option for me. So I suffered with it for a while. And then back then I happened to live in Seattle, and Dr. Eric Cobb also lived in Seattle. And through a cool chain of events, I actually got to do a private session with him.
Wow.
And he just gave me about probably 7 or 8 just these little joint mobility drills with my ankles and my wrists and a few other joints in my body, and moved them around. Within 3 months, my pain was gone.
Wow.
Plantar fasciitis completely gone. And then it was interesting, though. It took about 2 years. About 2 years later, I was scrounging through my medicine cabinet looking for something, and I noticed in the very back of my medicine cabinet my bottle of Advil. and I realized that it had been literally 2 years since I'd even touched that bottle of Advil, and it had gotten shoved clear in the back because I wasn't using it anymore. And I was a chronic Advil user because I was in so much pain, not only just my feet, but chronic migraines, shoulders, knees, hips, elbows, wrists, all over the place. And that's when it hit me. It's like I have lived 100% pain free for 2 years. No migraines, no headaches, nothing. Not only did my plantar fasciitis go away, but all the other pain went away. And I thought, this is significant. Maybe I should check it out a little bit more. So I signed up for one of the courses that Dr. Cobb teaches through Z Health Performance and took the first course, the introductory course, and I was hooked based on the neurology and all the information he had. That's where my journey started. And back then I was in the corporate world. I wasn't a gym trainer or anything like that. I've been active in a gym rat and into sports and mountain biking and motorcycling and snowboarding and skiing and all kinds of stuff all my life, but not necessarily like a trainer. So as a little bit of fish out of water going to his courses because they're designed for trainers to train the trainer, which is great. But I'm like, well, I'm not a trainer. I'm just here for me. And the more I got into it, the more I fell in love with it. And I ended up taking the whole entire course, went through the master trainer program, kind of just went all in, quit my corporate job in Seattle. Moved from Seattle down to Phoenix, just completely changed my life because I so much got into this. You're probably wondering, what's that got to do with habit change?
Well, before you go further, let me just share with our listeners that that's so much like my story, and so many of us come to Z Health. This idea of neuroplasticity is really what Z Health is all about. But just exactly like you, I came in a great deal of pain, had no idea what kind of impact that would have on my life, but I was just shocked, kind of sharing with a client yesterday, I don't have any pain in my body. Their question was kind of like, shouldn't you expect to just have a degree of pain as you grow older? And I said, kind of, but I was in a great deal of pain at 48 and I'm 54 today and I don't have any pain in my body. So it's really interesting what we're able to accomplish and learn from neuroplasticity. So exciting that people like you can kind of begin to dive in, and before you know it, you're through a 12-course curriculum of really deep education that takes 2 or 3 years to get through.
Yeah. So it was a lot of study, but well worth it. So here comes the habit change part, and this is also just kind of funny to me, but at first, the first couple of classes I took, his second level class has at the end of each day's last hour of the lecture, he talks about habit change, and more in the context of helping your clients. And I was like, I don't have any clients. I just tuned out, right? So it's kind of funny to think back on my first couple times I took that class, how I tuned out. But I have been chasing habit change my entire life. I can even remember being 4 years old, and I had this really interesting experience where I got in trouble for doing something I shouldn't have done, and I got a spanking from my dad. So I got the belt across my behind twice.
No.
To change my behavior. And even as a 4-year-old, I made that connection. Now, beforehand, I didn't know that behavior was incorrect. I was just an innocent little kid, right? But then I learned, okay, this is an incorrect behavior that I needed to change. And I made that connection in spite of the spanking. I knew that the intent of that pain was to get me to change my behavior, right? So the next day, I go out and do the same thing again, right? Didn't change my behavior at all. And beyond that, when my dad got home, me as a little 4-year-old, my dad's 6'4" and a beard, kind of a mountain man looking guy. I walked up to him, looked him right in the eye and said, "You'll be proud of me, Dad, because I didn't do that thing today." So not only did I do it, but I bold-faced lied to him, right?
Awesome.
And I remember turning and walking away from him and going, that was weird. What did I just do? Because I knew that punishment was intended to change my behavior. And as a 4-year-old looking up to your parents going, well, they must have it all together and know what's going on. I'm just a 4-year-old. They're adults. So they should know the best way to get me to change my behavior. But that didn't work. It did not change my behavior. So if that didn't change my behavior, what in the world is ever going to change my behavior? So I walked away from that moment even as a 4-year-old, just completely confused about behavior change. And I've been chasing it ever since, throughout my whole life. And I went through some substance abuse problems and all kinds of things, trying to change my behavior. Grew up in a community where behavior change was expected by the community at a snap of a finger. As soon as you determine you're doing something wrong, you should just have the ability to change, right, and be a different person, and that just didn't work for me. So when I got into the stuff with Dr. Cobb and started seeing what he was doing, and this is an interesting thing. If you go look at his video blogs, there's like a couple hundred of them now. The first 3 or 4 are about habit change.
Okay. Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
I can't find blog number 1. So if anyone ever finds blog number 1, tell me where that is. I can't find it. But 2 and 3 and 4, and I think maybe even 5, are all about habit change. So clearly that's important in his mind if that's the first thing that he starts talking about when he started his blog series a while ago. So anyways, I took the deep dive into it, and I will admit that I'm just standing on the shoulders of giants, mostly Dr. Cobb and his work. James Clear, BJ Fogg, Heidi Grant Halverson, Gretchen Rubin, a whole bunch of others. I've just taken all the work that they've done and that Dr. Cobb has done to synthesize all this and put it together in one place. Now, here's one of the problems. Depending on what research you read, there's roughly 1,000 to 3,000 self-help books written in the United States every year. And that has been going on for decades. So it's like, how in the world do you sort through all that clutter? How do you find just the best of the best, right? And so that's what Dr. Cobb has done. He's done tons of research, tons of reading. He's taken the best of the best, brought it all together in one place. Then he and some of his team members put together another compact curriculum, and then I've taken that and then kind of turned it into my own thing and kind of packaged it and added a few of my own experiences. But most of the information is, I'm just admitting, I'm standing on the shoulders of Dr. Cobb for all this stuff. But it works. So like I said, I've been chasing habit change all my life. I've had addiction issues and all kinds of things, all kinds of problems trying to change my own behavior. And all these questions that just things that didn't make sense. People would say, well, just do this, but that didn't work. And I couldn't, it's like too many questions, right? And I'm sitting in one of Dr. Cobb's advanced class, and he starts talking about this behavior change stuff, and all my questions start getting answered. Oh, that's why this, that's why that. Because what happened to me was sometimes I would be really successful at making habit change. And sometimes I was just a mess. And sometimes the things I thought would be really hard to change would be super easy. And the things I thought would be really easy to change were impossible, right? And so it's like, this does not make sense. It's just this chaotic mess, and I don't know how to navigate it. And this information I've put together here is the information that's changed my life and made me a different person. That's why I'm excited to turn it around and share it with other people, because it can make a difference.
Cool. Kyle,
that's how.
Why don't we go ahead and just talk a little bit about the URL that we've got in the comment section right now, because we're offering a couple of important of Kyle's offerings for free. He's been kind enough to do that for our viewers today, so thank you so much, Kyle. But can you talk a little bit about what that URL in the comment section might take us to?
Sure. So it's coachkyle.com/gameon, and it'll take you to a place where you can register to download the Module 1 and Module 2 out of my course, Winning at Habit Change. Now, I have 2 versions of my course. I have a digital version where I've sat down just like if you were with me on a one-on-one coaching session, and I videotaped all of that and have it all on tape. And so that's the digital version. Then I took transcribed all the scripts from that and turned it into a book format and kind of re-edited a little bit. But it's basically the exact same information. And that's what you get as Module 1 and Module 2 as a download from that book. So, and I've made it free just for your audience today. Yeah. And I'm going to offer something else that I didn't tell you about. I might get in trouble for this, but I will, for the first 10 people that sign up, I will give you 1 hour free coaching for those first 2 sessions. So you could split it up into 2 half-hour sessions for module 1 and module 2, or just do 1 hour. I charge $350 an hour for a single one-off session, so it's a pretty great value. So the first 10 people that show up in my inbox, you'll get a free hour from me.
Fantastic. Now, how do they show up in your inbox, or how, just by
when you click on when you go to that link, coachcyle.com, game on, there'll be a place to register. You put your email, you'll get an email from that, and that's where you can download the first 2 modules, and then I automatically get the email that you've registered, so I'll be able to tell who are the first 10 people to register.
Cool. And as you can tell, Cyle is super kind and generous, and one of the reasons I wanted to have him on the show today, I've known him for a couple of years, and we've been through several courses together, and I just fully back what he's doing and who he is. So many of us struggle with getting better, and we've got so many important things that we need to talk about today, but I think as you listen to what Cyle has to share moving forward, you're going to want this information. When Cyle says something like, "I'm standing on the shoulders of Dr. Cobb," he listed several other names, but those are all some of the top people in the field of habit change. There are formulas for this and ways to think about it that are mind-blowing, and it is equally mind-blowing that there are components of habit change that if you don't do, you won't get it. So Cyle, thank you so much again. Let's go ahead and dive into how should we start? We could go into habit change in you, or maybe a few of your clients. Why don't you take us through a couple of the big winners for you personally? What's been a couple of things that you've learned or takeaways that you've gone, okay, nothing else has worked, but this did?
Right. So one of the things you'll get in that module, the first module, is there's a place to figure out your fundamental tendencies. Now, fundamental tendencies are kind of like our base nature and how we operate through life. Now, there's a whole bunch of people out there that have categorized our personalities and behaviors, and there's a lot of great ones out there. This one is particularly useful for the habit change realm. So I know it's not the only way to describe our personalities, and a lot of times people say, well, what about this one and what about that one? It's like, yeah, they're great, but this one is specifically good for habit change. So when I found out my fundamental tendency and what it was, that explained a lot to me, because I had no idea why I was such a mess. So when you look at that, there's 4 basic categories, and then there's a subset underneath that. But of one of those categories, one of them is called a rebel, and that's me. I'm a rebel. And one of the things we do that's really interesting is we actually rebel and fight against ourselves. So I have this argument going on in my head all the time. Hey, Cyle, let's go work out. No, I don't want to. And I will actually fight myself, and it makes you feel really confusing. And then one of the things that is a very good technique to help rebels change their behavior is a thing called an identity transplant. So rebels tend to love identity transplant. Now, identity transplant's powerful, can work for any of the categories, but specifically for rebels, it's really good. So I realized that anytime, this is actually how I figured out as a rebel, I didn't even realize it, but anytime I've been successful at making habit change, it has always been through identity transplant. Even when I didn't know about it. Like as a teenager, that's when I was trying to get off my substance abuse stuff, and I just could not change. And I was trying everything, spiritual counselors and friends and family, and doing everything I could to break that habit and get off that substance abuse. And then finally one day it's like, I'm just going to be a different person. I'm going to reinvent myself and be a different person. And I just instantly that day, cold turkey, went off the substances and was fine, never looked back. So that's kind of a weird story, and people see people that change like that. You hear these stories of somebody they just quit smoking, they just quit drinking, whatever, and nobody can figure out, well, how can they do it and why can't I? And then we think there's something wrong with us. Well, more than likely that person was a rebel that did an identity transplant, whether they knew it or not. Another funny one that's not so kind of heavily tied into emotional importance or whatever was flossing my teeth. I was trying to floss my teeth every day. I'd brush my teeth every day, but I was like, I want to floss every day. And I'd floss maybe once or twice a week or something like that. And I was really working at trying to floss my teeth every day, and I just couldn't get it. Even using some of the techniques that I have in my in my course, like the 2 minute habit and tying your triggers together with something else. And I was trying all that, it just didn't work. So one day, I was actually in the middle of a road trip, and I think I was in the middle of Kansas somewhere. I don't know where I was. I was on a road trip across the country, and I woke up that morning and I said to myself, I am that guy who flosses his teeth every day. And I imagined two people talking about this third person. Well, who is that guy? Oh, he's just that guy that flosses his teeth every day. And that was me. I took on that identity, and that was 3 years ago, and I've flossed my teeth every day since then. Except for there were 2 days when I was on vacation somewhere, and I ran out of my floss ran out, and I didn't bother going to the store to get any more. But I've flossed my teeth every day since then because I'm that guy that
Sure.
does that.
Sure. And it's super interesting because I think we all hear floss your teeth 2 or 3 or 4 times a year from the hygienist. And I would guess that maybe continually 90% of the people just don't. And it's curious. I think there would be a great research study in why that is. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But when you talk about the identity change, and both of those sound like they're in that category of I'm just going to be a different person. Um, that's some serious mental gymnastics. You kind of, as you wake up one day, you have to, I guess, remember that you're that new person. Maybe you have to change out your friends. I don't know, how serious is that?
So there's ways to moderate that so it's not as extreme as the way I do it, because I'll admit I'm kind of an extreme person. I'm all or nothing, I mean, look at me and my background, right? I'm wearing a black shirt with a white background, right? That was not intentional. I just realized as I'm looking at my camera, it's like, yep, extreme right there. Look at me. So, um, but there are ways to moderate that and bring it into a less extreme version of the way I use it. So I have a friend who was a friend and a client who is an obliger, and this person wanted to make a change, and she used the identity transplant to do that as well. And she'd said, okay, I'm going to be that person. It's kind of an interesting thing because you can pick a person you already know, a literal another person, and you can take on their identity. You can think about what they do to do that, right? You can take on the identity of an obscure person that doesn't exist, like I did, that it was that guy, right? Or you can take on the identity of yourself at a different time and place. So maybe when you were in high school, you were in shape and you worked out all the time, and you want to do that again. So now you take on the identity of you when you were in high school, right? Or maybe you've never been that way, and so you imagine yourself 5 years in the future and you take on your identity. So there's different ways to do it, and there's ways to moderate it. And I have that in my course and explain how to do that and use it. But it's not the only technique, and I've actually found several other techniques that work quite well for me, like the 2 minute habit and some of the other things that are actually, even as a rebel, those will work for me as well.
Okay, so why don't we go into that a little bit? The 2 minute habit. Can you do
The 2 minute habit?
Yeah.
Sure. It's kind of the idea of making something so easy you can't not do it. Okay, I'm going to say that again.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Make it so easy you can't not do it. And that's your starting place. Now, people can get frustrated because they think they're going to be there in this tiny little place all their life, but you build on it over time. So the way it's written is you actually take your goal that you have, you break it down into something you can do in literally 2 minutes, and you set a timer and you do it for 2 minutes. So you make it a small enough goal that you can do it that way. But maybe 2 minutes is still too much. Maybe you need 5 seconds. Right? Or maybe 2 minutes isn't enough. Maybe you need 10 minutes. It just depends on you. And you can play with that and change around a little bit. But an example, one of my clients I was working with wanted to get up and study for, I think it was 2 hours a day, and study neuroscience and study all this stuff. But she just couldn't get it going. she would study on Monday and study on Tuesday, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday wouldn't study, right? So I started talking through with her, what's going on, how's this going? I was like, well, let's break it down into something smaller that you can do. I'll let you decide what that time frame is, but break it down into something smaller. So she broke it down to 20 minutes. And she sent me an email a few days later. She said, hey, it's going great. I'm actually looking forward to getting up in the mornings. Because what she hadn't told me was that her bigger goal was such a burden that when she woke up first thing in the morning, she dreaded even getting out of bed because she knew she had to confront that big blob of study time that either she was going to do or not do and feel guilty about. And so she broke that down to 20 minutes and had success and was studying and being successful in building that habit, and it was good stuff. So basically, I mean, there's a little bit more to it than that, but basically you want to take your big goal, break it down into something, what I call an ARMS reach. It's an acronym, ARMS reach, ARMS, attainable, reasonable, measurable, and specific. So a lot of times people say, hey, I want to stop eating gluten. What does that mean? Do you even know what gluten is? And if you do, how do you stop eating it, right? But stop eating donuts on Fridays at the office on Donut Friday between 10 and 11 when the donuts are there. Now that you can make it attainable, reasonable, measurable, and specific and break it down into something small enough to do. Now here's the kind of the art with that though. Maybe that is even too hard. So maybe you're in the habit of eating 6 donuts, right? So for the first week you say, I'm going to eat 6 donuts. Next week I'm going to eat 5 donuts. Next week after that I'm going to eat 4 donuts. The next week after that I'm going to eat 3, 2, 1, 0. You go all the way down, then you start replacing it with an apple or an orange or something like that, right? So basically you make it so easy you can't not do it. I don't care if that means I want to go run, I can't do that, so I pull out my tennis shoes and I stare at them for 10 seconds. I don't even put them on. I just stare at them for 10 seconds, right? Next week I'll put them on, not going to lace them up. Okay. Week after that, I'll put them on. I'll walk around the house and fix breakfast, whatever. Right. So you get the idea. You build on it over time. So that's kind of the quick version of the 2-minute habit.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I want everyone to know there's a couple of the items that I'm really looking forward to getting into. I don't want to go there right this second, but there's 2 terms that I want all of our listeners to walk away with from today's meeting. That is the better future fallacy. We'll get around to talking about that. And then also B equals Matt. These are 2 very powerful tools that work together to help us to change and to achieve our goals. But before we get into that, what I'd like to do next is maybe give us a couple of your favorite client stories. What have you seen people do that's really been fun to see?
Sure. So one of my most favorite was I had an 85-year-old client that I was working with who, bless her heart, had the courage to want to make some change in her life. And I have to apologize for my own preconceived notion, but I didn't expect somebody with that many years of maturity to even want to change anything at all, right? But she wanted to. And we were somewhere in the second module. Now, the module 2 is about goal refinement. Module 1 is the 4 pillars of habit change, which kind of like sets the foundation. It's getting rid of the guilt because we all feel guilty when we can't make the changes we want. Having a clear definition of motivation and understanding what motivation is, because there's a huge misconception around motivation. Learn about the 5 stages of change and then figuring out your fundamental tendencies. So that's the first module in the 4 pillars. The second module is goal refining. I kind of reference a little bit before. You have this big goal and you break it down into something small. But I have a bunch of worksheets and we run it through. I think I've got 5 or 6 worksheets in that module, and you run it through all these filters and you figure out, what do I really want to do? Because a lot of times we're doing something as a goal because we think we should, or somebody told us we should, or we heard that this is the new thing, or whatever, right? And so we start working through these ideas. So she had this goal, we're working through it, and we're somewhere in the middle of module 2, I don't remember where. And she puts her pencil down, because there's worksheets that you fill out. And sorry, I'm all over the place. By the way, the magic is in the worksheets. All right, I'm just telling you, if I could just give you the worksheets and you do the worksheets, that would literally change your life. The problem is the worksheets don't stand alone without some kind of explanation. So you need to at least read my book or listen to me yak a little bit to figure out how to use these worksheets. They're really powerful. But anyways, she was in the middle of one of those worksheets. She was writing, and she stops and she puts her pen down. She looks at me and she goes, "I don't want to do this." And I kind of freaked out because I thought she meant me and my course, right?
Awesome, right?
I'm like, okay, well, Alberta, what is it that you not want to do? And she says, "I don't want to do this goal. This goal I'm working on, this is not what I want."
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay. Well, what do you really want to do?
Wow.
And so we talked about that, and she had the courage at 85 to literally take her pen and draw a line on the piece of paper, scratch that goal off her list, and go back to the beginning of module 2 and start over and start the goal refinement process all over again. And then we found out what she really wanted to do, and it was different. It was similar, but it was different than her original idea, what she wanted. And so that was actually, when people ask me what made me decide to actually really chase this down, it was that moment.
Awesome.
Yeah, because the life-changing moment for her in that moment, and one other one, it was when we were going through the 5 stages of change. And there's stages that we go through when we make change. And the third stage is the preparation stage. And she read through the 5 stages of change, and this was kind of a group, small class, and she just blurts out in front of everybody. It's like, I got it. This I know why I keep failing at all my changes. This is going to forever change my life. And I'm like, what? She's like, the preparation stage. I never prepare. I just get this idea and I start trying to do it. And I never prepare for it, and I always fail at my changes. So it was those moments that just were, outside of like sweet times with my family and wife and kids and mom and dad and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, the most profound moments of my life have been taking people through this course and watching the look in their eye when they realize they just hit something that's forever life.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I love this work, and one of the reasons that Dr. Cobb gets into it so intensely, is because in all of our curriculum at Z Health, we basically learn there's a lot of power to neuroplasticity. It's like the most exciting thing to understand, that your brain can change. It can change a lot. It can change the way you feel. It can change the way you move. It can change the way you live. But
it can change the chemicals in your body.
But it's hard to change. And I love that Dr. Cobb is honest with that piece of the puzzle. Neuroplasticity isn't easy. It's not automatic. It doesn't just occur because we want it to. It actually is quite the opposite. It takes hard work. It takes incredible commitment. It takes time. It takes the right environment, a greenhouse to build around you so that you can make these things happen. So I think this is a really good point to launch now into this concept of this better future fallacy. Can you describe that?
Sure. At its basic level, it's this idea that tomorrow I'm going to be a different and better person with no effort put into it. So there's this thing in our head that says, in the future, I will be this perfect person that can take on these things and do these things and make all these changes without any practice or change to do that.
Yeah.
Right. It's like snapping your fingers and you're a different person. Right. And that just, it doesn't work that way. We have to put work into what we're going to do. Now, I know I kind of made it sound like with the identity transplant, there isn't any work in there, but there is actually a lot of work, because you got to figure out what that person does and make that be yourself, right? So it's still not just snapping your fingers.
Yeah.
This fallacy that our future will be better without us putting any effort into making it better.
Yeah, I just think that's so profound, because that's kind of a sneaky, lurking, I think, subconscious thought in so many of us. It's just, I'm going to be better someday. I'm going to be stronger someday. I've got this sort of image of what I want to be or attain, and it's sort of just setting there. So like your client who never prepared, I think a lot of us are stuck there. Even now, I think,
it's a really interesting thing, because it's kind of needed for survival when you think about it, right? If you have no hope, if you think there's no way things are ever going to get better, then that's a pretty dark place to be. So it's a bit of a survival response to go, it will be better tomorrow, right? I'm sure it'll be better tomorrow, right? You tell yourself that so you can keep yourself going. And you can make it better, but it requires a little bit of work and some practice and some skill. In Z Health, we loved it as a phrase that Dr. Cobb has: everyone's an athlete and everything is a skill. Now, when you let that sink in a little bit, it's pretty profound, because that means we can develop skills to do things differently in our lives, to be happy, to not push each other's buttons, to get along with other people, to swing a golf club and be a better golfer, whatever it is, right? Everything's a skill, and we're all athletes at some level. And so can we develop a skill deliberately and intentionally to change our neuroplasticity where we want it to go, rather than just letting life happen to us and neuroplasticity kind of washing over us because we're just sitting on the couch doing nothing? Mm-hmm. So are you being intentional with your life, or are you just being passive?
And of course, that ties directly into what we're experiencing with COVID-19, right?
Yep.
So a lot of us are hopeful. We're thinking things will eventually get better. I hope they get better. But to bring some more intentionality to that is something that I'd like to really set out there for my clients and our viewers today to sure. Think of not just the vague sense of things that will get better, but how can I make them better? Am I perhaps entertaining this better future fallacy incorrectly, that it's a fallacy? Or is there something that I could be doing today that's proactive, that is actually going to help bring that vision to pass? Is that fair enough?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So with that, a way that you can ensure this is this code or formula that I alluded to a little bit earlier. And Kyle's much more adept at this than I am. But the idea, can you go into the formula that we've talked about some?
The BMAT. Yeah, I'm looking through my papers here. I was going to hold up a little thing here of a screenshot so you can kind of see it. But basically, it's your behavior is the sum total of your motivation and your ability and a trigger. So when you look at the habit loop, trigger is one of the there's 3 events in a habit loop, okay, and trigger is an important one. That starts the process. So something happens that gets us doing a thing, right? So every time on my drive home from work, I can't not stop at the donut shop and pick up donuts and bring donuts home on my way home from work, right?
Yep.
So my trigger is I see the donut shop as I'm driving by, right? So can I change my trigger? Can I drive home a different route and not go by the donut shop and not get that trigger and not get the donuts, right? So anyways, so triggers are really important. That's an off subject, sorry. But so this is, I'm going to hold this up, and I'm sorry, it's probably going to be backwards by the time everybody gets it. But it's this graph, right? And you have your motivation here, you have your ability across here, and you have triggers out here someplace. And this red line is the dividing line where triggers do and don't work. And I'm pretty sure that's pretty backwards for everybody. But basically, if your motivation is high and if your ability is high, then triggers will work. But if your motivation, let's say your motivation is high, but your ability is low, then that falls in here and your trigger is not going to work. Okay, or vice versa. So what that means is, well, let me just go back to the donut thing, right? So am I highly motivated to, well, that's stopping a habit. Let's start a habit. Let's start about starting one. I'm going to go for a run every day. COVID-19, I'm going to get out and go out in my neighborhood and run around the block, right? So do I have the ability? That's the first thing you have to ask yourself. And how high is your ability? Now, when I had plantar fasciitis, my ability was at 0 to be able to go run around the block. So my ability was hard. Now, if my motivation was sky high to go run around the block, but my ability was low because I had plantar fasciitis. It didn't matter. No trigger in the world is going to get me to go out and run around the block. Okay, my ability is so low. Now let's reverse it. Let's say, my ability was really high. I was super healthy, but my motivation was really low for whatever reason. Then my trigger still won't work. So what happens is people see the habit loop, and I have a picture of that too. I'll just throw it out here because it helps explain a little bit. Here's a picture. Look at the habit loop. Basically, some people do 4 things, but I like 3. It's simpler. So you got a trigger or cue, you got the routine, you got a reward, and then it repeats itself, right? So people change their routine, or they change their reward, or they have a good reward in place, but their trigger doesn't work, and they think there's something wrong with their habit loop. There's nothing wrong with their habit loop. Their habit loop is fine. It's that their trigger isn't working because their motivation or their ability isn't high enough to enable the trigger to work. So people will think there's something wrong with their trigger when it's not their trigger. So
Yeah.
it's another one of these things where you kind of got to dissect it just a little bit to understand what's messing me up.
Yeah. Let's go into trigger a little bit deeper, because I know for myself and a lot of my clients, when I start to use that word, they're more familiar with it in a really negative way. Like I'm triggered to feel something bad or to behave badly. So can you go into how we're using that term here?
So a positive trigger, another name for that could be a keystone habit. So think about your day and think about days that you have good days versus days you have bad days. And think about, is there something I do on a good day that sets me off on the right foot or whatever, right? It's like a domino effect. You get this one thing to happen and it knocks all the other dominoes over, and you have this good effect through the day. So a trigger, so an example of a good trigger could be, you could use a keystone habit, something that's good already happening, and use that to remind yourself. I'll give you a straight out example out of my life in flossing. I use brushing my teeth as the trigger to floss. Okay, so even though I did the identity transplant, I still have to have that trigger of walking into my bathroom and getting to the drawer at my sink where my toothbrush and floss are, right?
Okay.
So that's my trigger. Actually, my trigger is walking into the bathroom in the evening with the intent of brushing my teeth. Then the trigger is there. That's my trigger. I'm already habituated brushing my teeth. That is not a problem. That habit's there. It's finding it. This is another way to say it. A habit that you've already got. And that's something in there as your trigger. So brushing my teeth, I use that as my trigger to floss.
Okay.
So
it's easy because you're already halfway there.
yeah, and you know what? We have habits everywhere throughout our day. We just don't realize it. If
Right.
you were to stop for a moment and think about how many habits you have in your day, it's a little bit ridiculous. And to prove that, just for a moment, I want you to imagine that when you wake up tomorrow morning, little gnomes crept into your house and rearranged every cupboard and rearranged where the milk is and the butter is in your refrigerator, and put your socks where your pants are and your pants where your socks were, and completely rearranged everything in your house. And you get up the next morning, how long is it going to take you to get your morning started? Because you're going to have to look for everything, right? So we put the milk in the same place on the shelf. We put the butter in the same place. We put our bread, the toaster, everything we put in the exact same place. It's habituated so that when we get up in the morning, we can just go through our morning routine, right? And not have to spend a lot of energy just to get our day started. So there's triggers everywhere, and you can find them if you just look for them. And they can be positive triggers. They don't have to be a negative trigger.
Okay. So let's give a couple more examples so that we can really give. I had a professor in college for a while, and he said he wanted to put the cookies on the lower shelf so you'd have access to them, right? So let's give people a couple more examples of triggers in a really practical way. What is something that, just a common something that people want to do, maybe be better at, and a trigger that might help them get there?
I'll give you a couple triggers in my own life. So Vision training is one of the things I'm into, and trying to make my eyes see better. And a lot of people don't know this. You can actually train your vision and see better and get out of glasses and all kinds of cool stuff like that. But that's a whole nother program.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do that one later. But I wanted to start doing some vision training. And I had this really elaborate vision training program worked up and all these eye drills to do. And I could not get myself to do them. I just couldn't, and I couldn't, I couldn't. So I started going through what I know, what I teach, right? And I broke it down. I was going to do one drill for like 10 seconds. And it required this piece of paper that had stuff on it that I would look at. And so it was this chart, right? So I got this chart out, but I just like left it on my desk and it still didn't work. I never used it. So I printed off like 4 copies of this chart, and I put them in different places around my house so that when I'd walk by them, I go, oh, I've got 10 seconds. I can stare at this for 10 seconds, right?
Nice. Yeah.
So if you come to my house, there's vision charts all over the place, and it looks really weird. But I'll stop and look at it and do it for 10 seconds and then move on. And that was my trigger to get me going. Now, I didn't stay there forever, right? But that was a trigger to get me started. You and I have talked about running shoes, and I already gave that example. If you want to run in the morning, put your running clothes out the night before, lay them out somewhere where you'll see them, and that will be your trigger to remind you to go do that thing. So, that's all I can think off the top of my head right now.
One story that I liked that Dr. Cobb brought up was how there was one of his clients who was supposed to get some exercise done early in the morning, and she had some positive triggers to take her that direction, but she got off track by a negative trigger because as he kind of quizzed her and went, what might be derailing you, because it should be easy. You were really great at this for 3 or 4 weeks, and then you just kind of fell off. And as it turned out, with a little bit of detectiving, they figured out that she was walking by her open laptop computer on her way to the closet where the exercise equipment was. And
Yep.
just seeing that computer open required her to think she had to sit down and go on Facebook or whatever, and then got lost. And again, I think that's just an interesting way to think about where we're at today,
Yep.
some potential we might be losing, because a lot of us have some discretionary time that we may not want, but we could do something with.
Yep. I actually tell that story in my course. So I have that story, that very, very story built into my course. Dr. Cobb's a great storyteller. He's got great stories, so I included that in mine. And I actually couple that with another exercise, is another one of the worksheets called Shrink Your Danger Window, where you look at what happens prior in your day and you back up. And that's what they did. They realized that her problem wasn't in the morning. Her problem was solved by the night before when she was done. Close that laptop lid, so that in the morning when she got up, she could walk past it and not be distracted. So that's another technique that I have in my course, is Shrink Your Danger Window. And that's one of the things you can do with that, is figuring out what happened before what happened.
Yeah. So to go over that code again, I can't really overstate the value of this. So write it down if you can. I'll try to put it in the comments. But B equals MAT, behavior equals motivation, ability, and trigger. And when we said at the beginning that, I'm sorry, did you want to say something, Kyle?
Well, and all at the same moment, right? So it's your motivation, your ability, and your trigger together is what makes your behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
So with this key, it's really a beautiful way to begin the conversation of what might be holding you back. And again, I want to take a moment here to really go deep and challenge the viewers and our listeners to consider something you want. What is a goal you want to attain that has eluded you, whether it's learning a language or playing piano? There may be time in us or among us in a different way. Those of us who are working full time, I have some friends that I'm sensitive to because they're working more than ever. Nurses, some construction people. But if you're not one of them, this moment may be very special to entertain what we're describing, to propel you into becoming someone you've always dreamed of. So think about that. that tool, and what is something maybe in the next 3 or 4 weeks you could look at that tool through that lens. Behavior equals motivation, ability, and your trigger. Which
Yep.
and I think people like Cyle are awesome at helping you see what might be off. Like, we want your motivation needs to be sky high. If that's lacking, you're not going to achieve the behavior change or achieve the goal that you think you might want, because you really just don't have the motivation to do it.
And I have something to teach people on how to, when they feel like they have no motivation. People tell me that all the time. I'm just one of those people that's not motivated, and that was my belief about myself. And I have some really important stuff to teach about motivation. So if you're worried that you'll never get your motivation fixed, I can help you with that as well. And that's in module 1 also.
So can you give us a glimpse of that? I was interested, and I might post this in the comments as well. But the world's strongest man is a guy from Australia, and it depends on how you describe strongest man. But he goes into the motivation and how he had to brain hack himself to lift the weight he needed to lift, and it's a little challenging to hear where he went with his brain to lift that kind of
Right.
weight. So, can you share maybe one or two, a little glimpse of motivation and building that?
Sure. I know we're getting close on time. I want to back up really quickly. If you're confused about the motivation and ability, there's subcategories of that. So there's personal motivation, and there's social and environmental. Okay, so for your motivation and your ability, there's 3 subcategories to each of that: personal, social, and environmental. So maybe your personal motivation is high, but like like for me, if I want to start a running program on July 1st here in Phoenix, Arizona, I am not going to be environmentally motivated to go out and run in 120-degree weather. Now, personally, I might be motivated, but environmentally, I don't want to go out and do that, right? So anyways, there's subcategories of that. If you're confused on that, maybe it's one of those other categories. So with motivation, there's a whole lot of ways to talk about motivation, willpower. You start talking about these things and it can get really confusing and really messy and really complicated really quick. So that's why I love this quote by Dr. Cobb that just completely simplifies it and explains it in a way. And for me, that was one of those moments where I heard him say this and I'm like, oh, yeah, that answers all these questions I've had about motivation, because I'm one of those people that keeps telling myself, I'm just not motivated. I'm too lazy. I'm undisciplined. I didn't care hard. I didn't care enough. I didn't try hard enough. I'm just not motivated, right? And I hear people say that all the time. So I love this definition. Motivation is a comparison between outcomes. Okay, now Dr. Cobb adds a couple more words. I say simply first, I'm going to add motivation is an emotional and or cognitive. So you're thinking about it, it's either a logical or maybe emotional or both. It's an emotional or cognitive or emotional comparison between outcomes. So I want to go back to my example. I want to run in the morning, right? And I've worked all week and I'm really tired. It's Saturday morning. This is my time I set to go run Saturday morning. I get up, I go into my closet to get my running shoes out, and my running shoes are here and my slippers are here. And I look at my running shoes and I look at my slippers. And I go out and run or put on my slippers and stay home, relax. I really want to go run because I want to get healthy. I just want to relax because I've had a really rough week, right? So I am comparing between 2 outcomes in that moment. And the thing is we don't practice how to deliver our motivation where we want it to go. So we just kind of whimsically let the motivation wash over us and pick whimsically one or the other. And usually it's the path of least resistance because we're tired, right? We don't work that hard. So I choose to put on my slippers and I'm sitting on the couch and I'm going, man, I'm just not motivated. Yeah, I was. I was motivated to sit on the couch more than I was motivated to go run. So tomorrow, can I take that same motivation and turn that motivation to sit on the couch and put on my slippers? Can I direct that into my putting on my running shoes and going for a run. So I'm here to tell you, you have all the motivation in you that you need. You don't need to go get motivated like you have to go buy it at a store. Okay, that's my problem. I spent my life, I can tell you, I spent my life believing that motivation came from a coach at halftime speech in the locker room, just ramping everybody up to go out there in the second half and win the game.
Mm.
And if it wasn't that, it was some motivational speaker. And believe me, I'm not knocking motivational speakers because there's some great ones out there. But I would search from one motivational speaker to the next, or one preacher to the next, or one guru to the next, or whoever that could emotionally charge me up enough to get me to go do this thing.
Yeah.
And I'd get all charged up and I'd run out there. And then Monday morning, I'm like, I don't want to do this.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess I'm not motivated, right? I'm telling you, motivation, if your source of motivation is a halftime coach locker room speech, you're never, well, I will be more polite than that. You're going to have a difficult time creating the habits in life that you want.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've certainly felt that and seen it in myself, where I mean, so much of what you say just resonates with me. There was a preacher actually who I followed for some time, and he was super inspiring and super encouraging, and it was like I leave that church on a high for 24 hours. You know, it was like what happened through the blur of the week and who I was Monday through Saturday just had so little to do with the motivation I felt when I left that church. Yep. And so it just really resonates with me, the power, the potential and importance of figuring ourselves out, figuring out what we really want, assessing really with a coach like you, how hard is it realistically for me to get there, and what are the real obstacles in my way? How can I fine tune this, articulate it, and find the pathway to get there?
Yep. And it's all there. It's like, I give the example of, you want to bake a cake. You have a recipe. You do certain things. You get certain ingredients. You measure them out. Use this, use that. Put it in the oven so hot, certain amount of time. And even if you've never baked a cake before, if you follow that recipe, now it's not going to turn out like a professional chef cake, but it'll still be a cake, and it'll still taste good, and it'll still be all right. But if you just start grabbing different ingredients and throw them together and do who knows whatever with them in the oven, you're not going to get a very good cake, right? Well, and we do that with habit change and behavior change. We think that maybe it's a better future fallacy. We think we can just know how to make ourselves better without using the proper ingredients and instructions and a roadmap and a coach and a way to get you there. But if you have that, you can be successful.
Fantastic. Well, I want you to think about any other last words that you want to share with our audience. I do have one question that I'm going to throw out here at you in a second, as you're kind of thinking through any last statements that you want to make. But the question that we have from one of our listeners is back on identity change, and they ask, is it just a mindset, or is identity change just a mindset?
I think not really. There's more to it than just a mindset. When I teach people that identity transplant, I like to take their goal through all the same refinement processes that anybody would go through, because you need to ask yourself all kinds of questions about that. So, if I want to be, instead of saying I'm going to go run this morning, I say I am a runner. Well, what does a runner do? Well, they run. Okay. They have running shoes. They have running clothes. They enter into running events. It's like it is a mindset, right? There's these things they do, but it's part of their identity. And again, kind of rebels kind of glob onto this a little bit more, but yes, it's a mindset, but it's a mindset with some preparation and thought that goes into it. So it's not just a kind of a whimsical mindset. And there's, even within that, there's still steps that you have to take. Like for my flossing, right? I had to go buy floss. Okay, sometimes you need material, right? If I don't have floss, I'm not going to floss. If I want to start jumping rope, do I have a jump rope? If I want to go run, do I have tennis shoes, right? So there's little nuances in there, but yes, it's a mindset, but there's more to it than that.
Right.
You're actually imagining yourself as that person and bringing that identity onto yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So such good words. All right, Cal, tell us a little bit more about just any direction that we might need to go to find out more about you, or what your next biggest endeavor is.
Well, you can go to coachkyle.com, and my name's Kyle with a C, Cyle. So I've got stuff on Instagram. I got a bunch of free stuff on Instagram. You can go in there. I taught through like 20 of my worksheets at the end of the year to get prepared for 2020. So you can get a bunch of free stuff right there. I have a free 3-part video series you can sign up for too. So I got a lot of free stuff up there if you don't want to pay for anything. So I would say that's the best way. And you asked me, is there any, man, there's so much. I mean, I printed off like 20 pages of notes here to go through. I'm just excited about this, and it's really cool because it changed my life, right? So my parting shot is, my goal is to help people be a better version of themselves. And there's answers and there's solutions between neurology and neuroscience. Little things like the latest research is saying you actually don't want to use your willpower to try to make changes. Now, there's a nuance between willpower and motivation, but the latest research is actually take willpower out of the equation to make changes. So there's interesting stuff like that psychologists are now doing research. Since the functional MRI came out back in 1990 or whenever it was invented, right about 1990, and they could actually figure out what's going on in people's brains without cutting off their skull cap and poking it with an electrode, which was pretty invasive. Now we're learning all the stuff that the brain does, and that's what Dr. Cobb gets into, and that's what you and I have gone through and learned a lot. But there's a lot of great information that's new and forthcoming because of the functional MRI and the power that brings. So that's why all this is new, and you might be hearing stuff you've never heard about before because it is new. I mean, 2015 they found lymph ducts in the brain. Textbooks had to be rewritten, right? We're learning new stuff all the time. So we're trying to get that. People like you and me are trying to get this new cutting edge information out there. We're both continually going back to the classes that Dr. Cobb teaches to keep that information updated and get you the best, newest. I'm lazy, right? I don't want to work that hard, so I'm taking shortcuts, and neuroplasticity is a great way to do it. And I've condensed thousands of hours of research and stuff all into one little place here that you can check out and make a better version of yourself.
Fantastic. I love those words. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us today. So much information, and we've just barely scratched the surface, honestly, on what's there. The 2 takeaways, only 2, and I'm sure we could get into 100 more. But today, that better future fallacy, own that, understand it. If you have that picture of just some idealized future, know that you very well are not likely going to get there unless you work with the coach or figure out some of the obstacles, figure out the pathway, the plan for getting there.
Yep, the plan and the roadmap, and you can be successful. Yes, it's complicated, but there's a lot of easy stuff that we can do to get you started and make you successful, and it's not that bad.
Yep. And the positive triggers. So that part of the equation, the behavior equals ability, motivation, or BMAT, motivation, ability, and trigger. Those 3 things. If you want those free resources from Kyle, go to coachkyle.com at Game On or /Game On, just like in the notes. And we'll try to have Kyle back with us in the future to share more about lifestyle changes for becoming the person that you want to be and obtaining your goals in the future. Thank you so much for joining us, Kyle. I'm going to take you off screen now and just ask our listeners to stick around for another second. Kyle, if you'll stick around on Skype, right, and I'll debrief with you in a moment.
Thanks.
But, everybody, thank you again for joining us on Game Changers. We'll come back next week with another guest and hope that you are enjoying our program. As this week and for always, keep your brain strong. Be aware of what you're thinking about and how you're training your brain, even unconsciously at this time. I'm real concerned about all of us who are exposed to really negative information. So make sure that you are giving yourself good, conscious brain training in the realm of gratitude, positivity, being realistic about how powerful you are And if you want to read some of those ideas on just how powerful a human being you are, go back to and read some of my blogs. I'm really focusing on that message right now, that we are incredibly mighty, powerful beings. And that is so true. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Game Changers.